No More Heroes is a 3D brawler or hack and slash game that originally released on the Wii in 2007. The game developers are also behind other games I really want to talk about because they're all peak. Now, I know you don't really care about this, so I'll keep things short, don't you worry. The game is loosely inspired by the 1970 movie El Topo, featuring a protagonist loosely based off Johnny Knoxville. This game is over the top and has likely inspired so many games, excluding sequels of course. So all you need to know for now is that Travis Touchdown, the protagonist of this game, is unlikely to ever get a night of full sleep again. Since this video is on the longer side of things, know that I will totally interview Travis Touchdown at some point, so wait for that to happen. Anyways, please enjoy. As the opening cutscene lets you know, this game is about a slightly dopey, thrill-seeking otaku named Travis Touchdown, who after a fateful encounter with normal Frenchwoman Sylvia Crystal, is now forced to game end 10 assassins in order to be ranked first in the world. In this somewhat meta cutscene, Travis alludes to the fact that gamers aren't patient, which is why he keeps things short and sweet, as all things should be. Even though he is depicted as competent enough to game end some random guy after hanging out at the bar, Travis is cool in a way that people would find your uncle cool. He's only cool because he has a cool bike and a laser sword. The opening does a great job of showing Travis as a reckless dumbass like your normal Californian dude bro protagonist, as it makes his transformation later on even more jarring. That's right, this game takes place in a horrifying realm, a setting even worse than the world of the Lisa games, a dark place known as California. At this point in time, he has blood on his hands, but he shrugs it off because it was just some guy he knew nothing about. Unlike the rest of the assassins, the Drifter was just some drippy guy who stood in the way of a wonderful one-night stand, which unfortunately didn't even happen. At this point in time, he's motivated by that snow bunny action, which is why he's so enthusiastic about getting introductions over with. If I ever play through this game again, it would be fun to see the difference between Travis at 11th rank and Travis at 1st rank. On a side note, it's also nice to have no training montage or whatever, as Travis seems to just start with fantastic swordsmanship in a similar way to Scott Pilgrim. We do find out why Travis is so skilled later on, but for now he's just slightly stupid LA weeaboo who delivers more quips than your average edgy cousin on Jackbox. Now, the first fight is very important when it comes to setting the tone of the game, and I think that for the most part, the level to obtain 10th rank is very good at doing that. The whole opening cutscene directly into the level is very competent at showing just how fast-paced and intense this game will become, so it's good to have this strong start. Also, the tutorial is optional, meaning that if you have some experience with 3D brawlers, unlike me, you can go right to attacking guards. I didn't really know what to expect with this game beyond just funny protagonist who is just like me for real, but with the tutorial I was able to understand how extreme this game was willing to go, especially with the combat. The finishing moves with the directional slices is a very fun gimmick, and I think that the whole high and low damage mechanics, along with blocking and charge attacks, are very well balanced. No mechanics in this game are truly broken, and they are very easy to pick up. However, the skill ceiling is also very high, especially with all future technicalities like sword types and wrestling moves. I like how extravagant Travis and his saber are in this game, especially when you pair it with genetic hitman bodyguard NPCs, as it's really that thing of anime protagonists among the crowd of regular people. I think my main gripe with this level was the layout itself, as sometimes the fancy corridors looked all too similar, which made me run around in circles for a while. There was also the problem of the waiting time in between game ending the last enemy and the next area being unlocked being just a little bit too long, as I had to wait for the death animation to be completely done to leave. It's not a big deal though, as I understand that this was a game originally for the Wii, so the waiting times would be longer, and I get that the developers wanted players to feel satisfaction as they ended the last person in the group of people that stood in their way. This is also where the player learns about the trading cards, which can be found all around the levels, in addition to the energy and health boxes that offer exactly that. As a tutorial, this level does very well to teach you about the mechanics of No More Heroes without being too in your face about it. The UI is simple enough to understand, and the pause menu is simple enough to navigate for the most part, and you feel the Wii era ooze through it. As you clear waves upon waves of enemies, the fight is broken by a phone call from Sylvia, who more or less acts like a substitute for a Twitch chat in this game, as she calls Travis right before every fight, telling him that he's probably going to die, but he should still try to go on because, oh well. Something I find bizarre about these calls is that Travis never seems to respond. Either he's too shy, ooh, or it's just a voice recording. I guess we'll never know. One of the best ways this game pushes its style in your face is with save points, as save points are just bathrooms, and I guess that taking a dump is the equivalent of saving. I guess it's more natural than writing a diary entry or something. Also, the way Travis gives energy back to its sword is by jorking it, which I guess makes me a 12-year-old boy if I find this funny. but I think it's neat and a creative way to introduce reloading. I know the humor in this game may be unfunny to some people, especially because most of it centers around Travis being down bad, but I promise that where this game may lack in funnies for some people, it makes up for it with gameplay and characters. Even if this game is supposed to be a parody of action movies, the first boss is this dude who kinda reminds me of Ganondorf. He's this super rich guy who I guess is done with life because when Travis shows up, he knows immediately what's about to go down, and they start throwing hands. The player also gets to know Travis a little bit better as he taunts Ganon before starting the fight. What a Sigma male. This is a pretty easy fight if I'm being honest, even for people like me who have zero experience with 3D brawlers, and it's a good way to ease into the game, especially with how bad the third fight can get. Not much is to be said here besides the fact that it's the first boss fight, so it's where you learn that not all enemies can be 3-shotted and be finished with one slice. The second phase with the clones is not that impressive as the clones go down pretty easily, but this helps the level as it's not supposed to be too hard. Yes, it would be awful if the game was baby difficulty, but on the easiest difficulty, this is perfect for a first boss. So Travis game ends Ganondorf in a pretty graphic way, which is going to be a running theme in this game, trust me. I wish there was more to say about the boss, but he doesn't give the player any new information, and he's really just there to show what an assassin could become later on in life. He's earned everything that he wanted to, and he's ready to die at the hands of the next ranked assassin. Sure, he dislikes Travis, but the same could be said about everyone in the game, so he isn't that special. Sylvia magically appears with her 2 goons who then clean up and take a few pictures. Travis learns from Sylvia that he is now ranked 10th, and instead of caring about ranking, which should be expected as he told Ganon he wanted to be number 1 right before unzipping his cranium, he immediately asked Sylvia if she'd keep a promise if he kept game ending people. Travis is actually so down bad, he's just like me, and it's kind of horrifying. He's obviously very hesitant on this becoming first ranked assassin thing as he realizes that more formidable opponents will soon arrive. However, Sylvia, in true Makima fashion, tells him that he's now in the top 10, meaning that he's got a huge target on his back. He has to continue fighting or else he may end up being just like Ganondorf. If this was originally a game about an otaku simp who really wanted to bag a snow bunny, it's now becoming a story about how a man is driven to become a paranoid curio seller by a bad snow bunny. I really like this change of pace and tone as it immediately adds more pressure onto the protagonist and the player, but for now though, Travis, with not too much blood on his hands, relatively speaking, still tries to secure something with Sylvia as he feels entitled to rewards for all his efforts. Even if Travis does end up losing a part of his humanity later on, for now he's still our favorite lovable goofball. Oh whoa. Travis goes back to the motel where he prepares himself for the next fight after receiving a call and worshipping his favorite thing in the world. Moe. So, this part of the game starts with Travis being more than just a slight bit creepy as he enters Sylvia's limo and learns that he has to pay for every ranked battle. Call it stupid and shameless padding, but I think that this part of the game completes it in such a fun and innovative way that will be elaborated on. Trust bro. Travis gets kicked out of the limousine at the job center, has the appropriate reaction to getting a 9 to 5. No! And this is where the player is first introduced to jobs, a way to make money to be able to afford the entry fee for the next ranked fights and to buy upgrades. No More Heroes has a very clear focus on ranked fights. However, there is a considerable amount of side content too, so I might as well just run through it here. There's the regular job center where you can accept to do normal things like catching scorpions in the desert or mowing some person's grass. These activities seem tedious, but they go by pretty fast, and usually they're set up in a way that makes it so that you only have to do them once. The guy who offers the jobs is also very eccentric and bizarre, so it just adds to that juxtaposition of quirky, fast-paced 3D brawler and something as mundane as cleaning off graffiti. Once you complete your low-life third-rater jobs, you're then able to accept assassin gigs, which are the primary way to make money in this game. Here the missions can be more tedious, especially if you're trying to 100% the game and buy everything, but because they're all combat focused, you never get bored as combat in this game is the equivalent of a MrBeast video paired with Subway Surfers gameplay and a Passenger of Shit album on the side. This is my job ranking, by the way, for anyone who wants to know. I know that the first available job of coconut gathering is the worst one in my opinion, but trust me, they get much better, and once again, you really only have to do them once. The main way to get around from the job center is by using the Speltiger. The bike is a very fun way to get around Sand to Destroy as it's basically GTA meets drunk driving. in Minecraft. You could choose to walk around, but why would you do that when you can just do cool little hops on your bike? Sometimes the boosting doesn't work and the camera angles are quirky, especially when drifting, but to be fair, this is a Switch port of a Wii game, so it's not that bad. B+. With this bike, you can go way beyond the speed limit, which usually results in Travis falling over and taking 0 damage because he's literally the driver from Drive 2011. It's probably the only fun thing about the overworld in this game, as there's not much else to do, so I'm glad that they included it in the final version. I hope it remains throughout the game because it makes grinding for money so much easier. I previously mentioned how money is used to pay for ranked fights in this game, however, you're able to also use it to buy upgrades and new drip so that any assassin you come across fears you just from one glance. The clothing store, Area 51, an obvious reference to the hit 2011 movie Paul, gets more stock when another assassin is eliminated. This is probably because the cashier is a younger Californian version of Aiden Pierce who can sense the ever-growing bloodlust of Travis and wants to satiate that by giving him more Fortnite skin. What a guy! Other places in which you can spend money is in Naomi's lab, which is unlocked after becoming ranked 9th. Here is where you can buy upgrades for your sword, and based on how much you upgrade it, a lot of things can be known about you. You could either choose to be a sweat and grind to get all of the upgrades as soon as they are available, or you could be like me and completely raw dog the game, not knowing about Naomi's lab until much later. The pieces you can buy upgrade the beam katana, not too much individually, but when they've all been purchased, the game does become that much easier. There are other versions of the sword in this game, but you're able to purchase them much later on, after the 6th and 3rd ranked fights. While I believe them to be purely aesthetic like the items in Area 51, upgrading your sword model makes the game significantly easier, so I would recommend you upgrade only if really necessary, as the game becomes mindless mashing without much room for experimentation and discovery. These aren't immediately relevant when you unlock the overworld, however, it's probably a good time to talk about them now too. No More Heroes is a perpetrator of a terrible sin, having collectibles be a part of a overarching fetch quest. In what may be one of the most bizarre Dragon Ball references, the player has to go around Santa Destroy looking for 49 Lovikov balls that you have to return to this drunk Russian guy in a bar so he can grant you new skills. Now, this is an obvious reference to how Shenron was added to Fortnite and fell off immediately. While finding this dude's balls is tedious and somewhat annoying, especially with how bad the map is in this game, he does grant some very useful skills like new attack types and increased range on things like crabs, and general quality of life improvements like being able to see enemies on the minimap or being able to dash. This side content besides the job and assassin gigs are good at being exactly that, as not doing them does still allow you to advance in the game without much difficulty. Sure, they make the game easier and allow for some improvements quality of life wise, but they're not a necessity. Finding all the Lovikov balls is more difficult than it should be simply because the map, and especially the minimap in the overworld, is awful. I get that they were trying to make a compass with an old digital watch aesthetic, but it completely falls flat as pixels are often inconsistent with turns, and in a game where most of the overworld traveling is done by drifting and boosting in an urban environment, following just one pixel is not fun and much harder than it should be. Additionally, the north side of Santa Destroy has actually nothing to do, which is a funny observation and an obvious reference to Northern California. All of this to say that assassin gigs and regular jobs, very fun side quests. Lovikov ball searching, not fun side quests. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So you get the money normally without too many issues, and then you go to the ATM to pay the fee. For some reason, you then have to go back to the hotel to accept a phone call that tells you you can now go to another ranked fight. This happened before every subsequent fight, and it is a bizarre way to do things, but I'll forgive it because it then means that I'm able to use the bike more often. So the phone call is taken, and the next fight against Dr. Peace is available. Weirdly enough, this detective guy has to be fought in a baseball stadium. I guess doctors in California are just built different. They're like rivals to the Ohio doctors. Get it? Only in Ohio, guys. Like and subscribe. Most of the level takes place in the parking lot of the creatively named Destroy Stadium, and you now have to face off against more armed enemies than in the first level. I guess it's fitting considering most of them seem like baseball fanatics. Don't you just love it when your insane and over-exaggerated game has some sense of realism? All of this realism of being jumped in the Dodger Stadium parking lot was then taken away when Travis went Super Saiyan from the slot machine in his head that appears when he game ends sometime. That's right, from time to time when game ending people, Travis will have a slot machine that goes off in his head to give him superpowers. Some make him go Super Saiyan, where he screams strawberry on the shortcake, which allows him to one-shot everyone. Others just make him start tweaking after 20 Benadryl, and he starts shooting things with his sword. I really wasn't lying when I said what I said about the combat earlier. Armed enemies are unsurprisingly harder to eliminate than bare-fisted ones, however, for the most part you don't feel the difference unless there are like 4 of them on you at once. Early game, that barely happens, so once it does start happening, you are somewhat ready and hopefully better at the game. So Travis' game ends through this Californian baseball stadium collecting his favorite WWE Yu-Gi-Oh cards along the way while also visiting the Hat Man unless he gets stuck in a baseball minigame. If you're good at rhythm games, this probably won't change much as I only knocked out 3 people, and trust me, I have spent way too much time on Fortnite Festival recently. These breaks for dumb minigames along with the jorking recharge animations are a staple of No More Heroes, and to me it really helps it set it apart from other games in the genre. Yes, I am aware that the Yakuza games do a similar thing in a way more expansive and varied manner, but No More Heroes holds a special place in my heart because it has one thing the Yakuza games will hopefully never have. Masafumi Takada. That's right, the composer of the music in the Danganronpa series is also responsible for the music in this game. I know I don't think I'll ever be able to escape from that damn franchise, but I'm finally coming to terms with it. Takada's efforts are incredible in the game as the soundtrack may sound better than Danganronpa's. Yes, you hear Cashmere Cannonball way too many times, but it helps set the mood of Travis's life-altering encounters perfectly. All of this to say that No More Heroes is like Danganronpa but for even bigger goons. Yes, Yakuza may have more depth than No More Heroes, but the tones are very different and both have huge merit. Maybe when I actually finish a Yakuza game, I may make a video on it. Hint hint nudge nudge. Rant over. Another phone call from Sylvia tells us that the boss is soon up ahead, meaning that it's time to shift. I really like how when Sylvia calls, Travis has to walk down these usually long corridors. It makes the fight and that call so much more important. I just wish that Cashmere Cannonball stopped playing every time it happened, as while the track is good, it really doesn't help. This call plays out in a similar fashion to all of them, and Travis once again doesn't respond. A new move is unlocked, the player can heal and save, and now it's time to head to the Garden of Madness, also known as Dodger Stadium. Dr. Peace is like Frank Sinatra mixed with Patrick Bateman mixed with the father from Trap, as he's a crooner who's obsessed with getting a reservation at a good restaurant and loves his daughter a lot. More importantly though, we find out that the entry fee we worked so hard on paying for was actually just to fund the guy's outing with his daughter. Like Travis, we don't care much for the yapping and want to get to the fight, showing the first hints at Travis's bloodlust. Dr. Peace brings out the big iron on his hip, which completely throws Travis away. However, this ability is never used again because I guess Araki forgot. Dr. Green Thumb's magic gun disappears, the fight is won relatively easily, and I guess that the laser sword is mightier than the gun in this universe. This fight serves as good training for projectile enemies though, as they are more common in the latter half of the game, so thank you Charles Bronson inspired fighter for that, I suppose. What he lacks for an actual fight, he makes up for in backing track because this soundtrack is unsurprisingly very good in the boss fight, more than it should be perhaps considering how underwhelming this boss is. After this boss fight, Travis shows some form of remorse as he doesn't care for Sylvia and her snow bunny thighs. Unlike the first fight where he was puppy-eyed, he understands that he has taken the life of someone with a family and that weighs on him. Yes, the man was literally Californian Patrick Bateman, but he still had a daughter that he loved very much. That or Travis is still pissed about the entry fee and being kicked out of the limousine. While I think that the first option makes for more compelling storytelling as it tells the player that the protagonist is in here against his will in a similar situation to Jason from Far Cry 3, but knowing this is the Goon game, I think the second one is more likely, especially at this point in time. It's also interesting to talk about the sense of fulfillment that has been mentioned by both fighters before this battle and by Travis during the previous boss fight. After moving up a rank, Travis keeps saying that he doesn't get a sense of fulfillment after defeating someone, which is unexpected for him. While he seeks thrills and wants to fight someone stronger, I guess so far he can't find his match. This could also mean that Travis doesn't get what he's fighting for and just slightly hints that he might be here for the wrong reasons. Either way, Travis goes home to save and he awaits his next fax from the association. 2 down, 8 to go. Before going to work, Travis receives a phone call from Beefhead Videos who tells him that he needs to return an adult film because it's late. It's time to mention his apartment as he is truly what it means to be a loser in 2007. He lives alone surrounded by anime figurines and posters, and the only thing he gets as entertainment is prawn. Travis quite literally has nobody except a cat named Jean that you can pet, and even then, a cat isn't a real person. This loner lifestyle could be why he's so desperate to get with Sylvia, as otherwise he sees absolutely nobody. The fact that he lives in a motel and has to set up an actual home in there means that he doesn't have enough to pay for an actual house in San Destroy, and despite making more income thanks to new jobs, he uses it to keep climbing up the ranks instead of moving out. Either Travis can't make good financial decisions, or he is just the most down bad individual on the planet. The latter is more likely. Speaking of money, the association faxes Travis the bill for the next fight, and it costs $50K more than last time, effectively setting that trend in place. A few odd jobs later, you get back to the motel to receive a call from Sylvia, who is using her nudist riz, I guess, to get Travis to head to the high school. And no, Travis is not going to pick up muffins. Turns out the 8th ranked assassin is somewhere in the school. Also turns out she's ranked number 8 because she's 8 years old. I mentioned nudist riz, and this is somewhat important as it doesn't really work on Travis in this instant. He was like a dog in heat before playing baseball with Bateman, but it seems like after taking another life he's pissed with the world, and more importantly Sylvia, who is still forcing him to game end 8 others. I really like this touch because it gives Travis a bit more depth instead of just being Captain California. Speaking of California, the next fight starts off like any normal schoolyard fight in the state because Travis is wiping hordes of enemies in front of the school before inevitably bursting his way into the establishment. This level for the most part doesn't introduce new memorable gimmicks, as now the shooter types enemies are more common. I think the inclusion of shooter enemies in a school really did not age well. What were they cooking with this one? I guess we'll never know. To balance out whatever real-world problems the US may be facing, the Team Fortress 2 Pyro is also in this level. Usually they're not a big deal, but can quickly deal damage if the fire is untreated. Luckily though, extinguishers are scattered throughout the level. What I like about this level especially is that there is no pause in the game forcing you into a tutorial that teaches you about pyro mechanics. Sure, the extinguishers are marked on your minimap and have a heavenly glow about them, so you can't miss them, but at least it doesn't disturb the flow of the level. While the inclusion of pyros in a school is very bizarre and unexplained, it's at least somewhat justified, as one of them turns on the school sprinkler system, which prompts a very goofy, silly segment in which Travis has to run funny to a circuit breaker because his beam katana is out of juice. I mentioned earlier how the introduction of extinguishers doesn't disturb the natural flow, however, this segment unfortunately does. While it features a silly running animation and it is fun to bait the AI into attacking you only for you to swerve them, this segment doesn't add much besides making you explore the school a bit more. C+, I guess. The circuit breaker is, well, broken, and after recharging touchdowns Travis, your job is now to game in all the NPCs you swerved by in the previous sequence. Strangely enough, there are no pyros as the sprinklers go off. Actual 10 out of 10 Kino detail in a wonderful game. Bless No More Heroes. The chase for the 8th assassin leads you to a basketball court where I think you encounter the first black NPC in the game. Again, what are they cooking here? After the sledgehammer-wielding basketball players are all taken care of, Travis exits the court and receives another phone call from Sylvia, who gives a usual low-tier god-type speech before he takes a meaningful dump and retrieves another weirdly placed luchador mask. The Garden of Madness is actually living up to its name, as the next ranked assassin is an actual child who seems to be into very radical ways of dealing with peers. The two assassins then take a nice stroll to an abandoned building close to the school, I guess, and Travis seems to be really blasé during the entire interaction. He mostly shrugs off any of Shinobu's comments, and even when she threatens to avenge her father, he doesn't seem to take it too seriously. This whole fight seems to be a pastiche of old samurai movies, especially with the sunset lighting on the stroll and the sword fighting in the abandoned building. Some of the things Shinobu says later on also make her seem like a character straight out of those flicks, but don't worry, this fight isn't stuck in the past. It's only after she launches a sonic boom towards him that he realizes he might be in danger, as he should. Shinobu is, from what I've seen at least, regarded as the hardest boss in the first No More Heroes game. This is probably due to the fact that at this point, purchasable upgrades aren't necessarily impactful, and Shinobu herself has many iframes, making it harder to land attacks. Her attack patterns, like most bosses here, are pretty simple to understand, but she does have little openings, especially when compared to people like Dr. Mario. This is where I got my first death of the game, so obviously I might be a little bit biased, but in my opinion this is a boss fight done right, as it actually forces you to play along with the attack patterns instead of allowing you to just spam or run around as you did in the first two main boss fights. Do I think that some of her dodging is unfair? Yes. Do Do I think that this difficulty spike is weirdly placed? Also yes, but I would be lying if I said that it wasn't fun trying to figure out the sound cues and associate them with certain attacks. I know I'm talking about this boss fight like it's the hardest thing ever, but if you have experience in Souls-like games, you're probably going to look down on this game a lot, which is exactly why there are difficulty options at the start of the game. Overall though, the fight is a no-nonsense battle typical of the 3D brawler genre, which is good to see after one underwhelming boss fight. I like how during this fight Shinobu's way of taunting Travis is by reminding him that she's a girl and he doesn't have the balls to kill her, something that may have affected his decision to spare her. That's right, unlike the previous bosses, Travis doesn't gruesomely end her. Instead, he just stabs Shinobu and suplexes her, telling her that he never game-ended her father because Travis is a huge Jacob stan, and to be fair, who wouldn't be? He doesn't spare her because she's a girl, he spares her simply because it was funny. Again, what a Sigma male. She doesn't want to be alive anymore because it brings her dishonor, which once again feeds into the bizarre samurai delusions of the girl, which Travis just finds hilarious. While this sparing does seem like sequel bait, trust me, it actually has an impact later on in the story, so good job, Travis. As much as Shinobu did make me suffer, I'm glad that she gets to live because she gets to live the rest of her life taking the fattest L imaginable, which is a fate worse than death in many ways. Travis and Sylvia's post-fight interaction is one of the weirdest ones, as it starts off with him seemingly showing an unwillingness to game end others, especially Shinobu because of how young she is. Sylvia insists that you have to game end whenever you can because revenge is very possible in this universe, but Travis reiterates that he wants to spare her, and not for the obvious reasons. Instead of showing morality, he believes that the best time to game end Shinobu is when she's older and stronger, as his motivations have now changed from getting with Sylvia to just fighting people stronger than him. This is a bizarre deviation, especially when you consider how out of left field this is for him in the moment, but it gets back on track as in some sick and twisted way the two characters start flirting when mentioning how sick they are in the head. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie, but I'm happy that Gooner Travis is back among us. At this point, Travis has fought Ganondorf, a crooner, and a child. You'll never be able to guess who the next victim on his path will be. His next opponent is one of the most detestable figures in Sand and Destroy, and his downfall will surely bring joy back to the West. Everyone, please welcome this. You already know how this goes. You get a job, go to the ATM to pay the bill, and head back to the motel to receive your call. It all makes sense so far until Sylvia seems to be in a war zone, also known as American retail on Black Friday. Immediately, this makes Travis panic, which shows that he still cares at least a bit for her safety, as she is the root of this whole situation after all. So you normally rush out of the hotel room to get on your bike, but before leaving, you receive a letter telling you that the next ranker is a quote-unquote dangerous dude, and that there's no going home now. It tells you that you're becoming a real man and no amount of tears will wash that away, and that you've got to head to the subway station apparently. I guess the next opponent is a California Ninja Turtle. Now you actually exit, and surely enough you go to the metro station to learn that your next opponent goes by the name of Destroy Man. And I guess his outline is similar to that of a Ninja Turtle. I'm very biased for this level, mostly because I personally love subway settings in video games. Think Boston and Fallout or the Splatoon 2 DLC. This one is no different. I love the atmosphere created in underground settings mostly because of how cut off it is from the rest of the world. It's almost like a whole different universe. I especially like the way in which the ticket booths are used as a sort of checkpoint that really tell you that there is no going back. Not only does it put pressure on you to perform well, but it also makes more sense than that dastardly fog you'll come across later in game. Unlike Fallout, this level also has a functioning metro, so while it takes away from the atmosphere, the claustrophobic feeling of fighting in one of the carts is executed very well here. The camera angles aren't awkward at all, and the enemy placements give the player a sense of progression as they aren't placed in the exact same way every time. Sure, it would have been nice to have difficulty increase in a crescendo, but this still works better than swarming you with 3 random NPCs for every cart. The lighting in the train along with the animations in the window add to the sense of urgency here, and the train segment also doesn't overstay its welcome, which earns it a very respectable A rank in terms of segments. I wish it was a bit longer, but for what it is, it's really flipping good. So after game ending multiple people on a moving train, you're dropped somewhere else, and I just want to celebrate how well they got the atmosphere of this empty metro station. There's no music playing, no enemies, and the only sounds you hear are Travis's echoing footsteps. The atmosphere is not eerie, but it's something adjacent to it, as while nothing inherently bad is happening, this long break in between battles signals that something more intense is sure to come. While this silence should be comforting, the player is already on their hind legs ready to attack if anything happens, as this atmosphere is very foreboding. Chef's kiss level so far. Surely enough, this passively oppressive atmosphere that has been so carefully crafted gets thrown out the window as soon as you get back to the surface. What awaits you is 3 warehouses full of people wearing cat-shaped bags on their head. They're big Monster Cat fans. Now we're back to more traditional 3D brawler / beat 'em up gameplay, as you are forced to take on waves upon waves of these guys in slightly bigger areas, except now there are stairs equipped with their own wonky angles that don't really translate well to combat. It's fun in the sense that you can test out your newly unlocked wrestling moves and can try out new combos against all of these people, but it is a downgrade when compared to the carefully placed enemies in the train who came at you in clear ways, making it feel like you were actually making progress as there were less of them to wipe out. Here, the only clear progress is made when the next door magically opens, allowing you to leave. After taking care of the original stand base, Sylvia calls and seems to be fine as she banters with you, as you know she usually does, and reminds you to use the cool porta potties before your next fight. You enter the final warehouse and run into this twunk who's complaining about his 9 to 5 in what seems to be postal services. Now there is a clear contrast between this laid back dude talking about casual things like job and the huge amount of bodily fluids splattered all around the room. This makes me think that this seemingly cool dude should not be trusted. Maybe he's not such a nice guy. Can you guys tell I'm a philosophy major? I only make 5,000 IQ statements. This whole cutscene is filmed with such a shaky camera that it reminds me of Breaking Bad. Speaking of that show, this polite guy keeps requesting for Travis to turn around so he can prepare, and as soon as he does, he fires a laser beam at Travis, attempting to backstab him. This is an obvious reference to when Mike Ehrmantraut became a superhero and fought Homelander in Season 6. So it turns out the next opponent is this costume soup named Destroyman who won't hesitate to throw punches below the belt in order to win. The man who seemed to be such a polite and laid-back individual is actually the most morally corrupt out of all the bosses so far. He will do quite literally anything to win, even if it means giving almost fatal discharges in a handshake with his opponents. Unsurprisingly, this is what happens to Travis, which probably motivates him enough to get back into rank killing for real this time, as while he did kill many goons previously, they were unnamed and unrecognizable. Destroyman probably has a life outside of being an assassin, and once you associate a name with a face, it's harder to hurt them. The trend of Travis being electrocuted continues in this pre-fight cutscene, and to make matters worse, Destroyman is just laughing at his opponent's misery, not hesitating to attack him when he's down. Unfortunately for Destroy Lonely, Travis is a direct descendant of Son Goku, and unlike his ancestor, he doesn't plan on dying just yet. Thus begins the fight that will probably teach Travis that sometimes he has to leave his morals behind when fighting other assassins. Unfortunately, this fight was one of the easiest, as this hero was probably trained in UA since he kept announcing his attacks before performing them. Unlike Shinobu, this guy had so many frames where he was vulnerable and his attacks were very cheesable, so he inevitably got swept. For as dangerous as he seemed in the previous cutscene, this battle is probably the most underwhelming, especially since it follows the amazing train sequence and the Shinobu boss fight. Luckily, in the post-fight cutscene, Travis takes his time before game-ending him. He watches as Destroyman begs to be spared in a complete opposite to the previous boss. When Travis decides to let him bleed to death, he whips out one of his last dirty tricks trying to go for another low blow, which Travis is unfazed by as he just Phil Swift boats him, ending the life of the dastardly Destroyman. I like how this battle is placed in between two others where Travis shows a more human side, as this battle for 7th is where Travis shows his more sadistic and uncaring side. Not only did he take his time to finish off his opponent, he also seems to be more enthusiastic about sleeving with Sylvia the Snow Bunny, planting the seed for his more psychopathic development later on in the story. While he's still very similar to the man we met at 11th rank at this point, he's slowly but surely finding out that maybe being ranked first has its perk despite all the bloodshed. This thought, however, is challenged in the 6th rank fight when he squares up against Holly Hills from Diary of a Wimpy Kid. For now, all heroes of Santa Destroy have been eliminated. This is truly a No More Heroes.
Say that again?
If you are thinking that topical parodies of superheroes is the only genre subversion in this game, you'd be dead wrong, as this next fight is a parody of the quintessential anime trope of beach episodes. After assassinating the in-universe equivalent of Pizza Hut, Travis receives the shortest phone call from Sylvia, who just tells him to make his way over to the beach. Our favorite Gooner is unsurprisingly elated at what this may entail, completely disregarding the fact that this battle for sixth is also awaiting him at the Body Slam beach. Another clear example of what the promise of a snow bunny does to a man. I know this is a minor detail, but I like how when making your way to the beach, you have the option to just see it before entering the level from the overworld, and there's actually nothing. I know this doesn't really matter as nobody mentions the sudden appearance of landmines all over, but I'd like to imagine that as soon as Travis goes to meet Sylvia, the army just claims the beach and rigs it with explosives in less than 2 minutes. It makes the army actually seem competent. So Travis makes his way to the beach, and as soon as he arrives, he's offered to help Sylvia oil up. Of course, he takes up the offer and attempts to get the freak on. Luckily for the player, these advances are swiftly rejected, and she reminds him that only after being ranked first can he attain Snow Bunny Heaven. Like the true beta boy toy he is, he obeys the orders given to him by Sylvia, which mostly consist of wiping out anyone on this beach besides them. Despite often playing the role of nonchalant swordsman, Travis is still the average touch-deprived man who will do anything to get even the littlest amount of play, showing that beneath all that charisma and skill is just a slightly pathetic man. So far, Travis has seemingly been going back and forth on his feelings for Sylvia, as after every rank fight he's questioning if what he's doing is right, and for once, it seems like he's on his way to becoming a cold-hearted assassin, as not only was his previous game ending more cruel than any previous one, but he seems to have made his mind up about Sylvia. What doesn't help Travis see the beauty of life is the fact that this pre-boss fight segment where you mow through waves of soldiers is one of the worst ones in the game so far. This is mostly due to the fact that soldiers spawn in multiple places in between checkpoints, and sometimes this means that they spawn behind you. While I wouldn't mind this normally, the camo these soldiers have make them blend into the other obstacles present in the level. While I get that the point of camo is, to be camouflage, I wish there was a clearer indication of where they were, whether it be diegetic or just one big arrow on the minimap. The minimap does tell you where they are if you have enough Lovey-Cuff balls, but the range of it is abysmally optimized, especially in this level, as most of the enemies will spawn closer to the previous checkpoint, which is usually on the opposite side of the player. Additionally, the sound cues are minimal, mostly because they don't extend beyond a "he's there" or "get him." I get that this isn't a huge open world game like Far Cry where NPCs have full-on discussions with each other, and that Wii hardware didn't have 600 directional volume, but I do wish it was more clearly indicated where and when enemies spawned, as it would save some time from fighting with re-render distance to see which 3 pixels need to be game ended. This segment is also full of landmines, which are more clearly indicated on the minimap. There's not much to say on these as they work well as obstacles since you always have to be on the lookout, but they're implemented in a way that feels avoidable and fair if you have a minimum amount of skill. Not only do the landmines make some sense with the army setting the level has going on, but it also serves as a pretty good natural way of training the player for the boss fight that has the main gimmick of being a mole person. I think the developers realized that the enemy placement was wacky, so later on in the level a short cutscene plays to let the player know that enemy reinforcements has arrived. While it does ruin the flow of the game a bit, it's still an improvement over earlier. On another note, Travis's pathetic side is getting the limelight in this level, as he keeps getting into these Looney Tunes-ass cutscenes where he steps on a landmine. This happens 3 times in a row, and every time a blood-curdling scream plays. I don't know who gave directions to the voice actor to scream like that, but I like and respect them a lot more as it makes the cutscenes that much better. No! The phone call from Sylvia is probably one of the most important ones, as this is one of the only times that she points out Travis's change in personality. She points out that he's been becoming more cocky since he ranked 7th, and that this sudden rise of self-assuredness is bound to cause his undoing. This is one of the few times that Travis's more sadistic side is called attention to, and I love how it happens right before the fight that makes him question everything. He went into this rank fight so much more confident, especially after oiling up his boss, and at this point we expect him to lose even more morality as time goes on. But this next boss fight does the exact opposite. It's a shame that it takes another game ending for Travis to realize that he's becoming a monster though. The start of the boss fight shows Travis at his most cocky yet. When questioned about his views on hurting others and game ending in a very familiar way, he says that he lives for it. When asked on his views on death, he responds that it has never crossed his mind. At the start of this fight, Travis is becoming the assassins that he's game ended so far. He's hellbent on hurting others and ranking first, and it's not even his fault. Even after being warned by Sylvia over the phone, his stubbornness and stupidity force him to get into another life or death situation more intense than the last. This arrogance could also be something that he learned after the Destroy Man fight, as he realized that the person he hated so much in that moment was actually a death-fearing coward. Maybe this whole exaggeration of the nonchalant and cool persona he has going on is just him coping with himself, trying to be as different from Destroy Man as possible. But hey, that's just a theory. While Holly is trying to talk and maybe get to know Travis before the fight, he doubles down and threatens her, which could be interpreted as him now having trust issues, especially in ranked fights after the previous battle. Or it could be that his bloodlust is becoming more apparent with every passing second. Either way, Travis is getting more character development than most Far Cry characters after the 4th game. This bloodlust is making this fight harder for him, as his opponents is very gimmicky. The stage this time around is full of pitfalls that Travis can fall into, and if you don't button mash in time, you get exploded by a handful of grenades. Luckily, after falling into one of these, they're marked by darker sand, and the button mashing pattern isn't complicated, so it never feels like the odds are too much against you. Even if the cutscene makes it seem like Travis died in the whole explosion, he's the descendant of Son Goku and Johnny Knoxville. It's going to take more than that to take him down. The boss is another projectile-based one. She has multiple attacks beyond the aforementioned whole gimmick, these attacks being an AoE missile launch that can be parried pretty easily, and a barrage of heat-seeking missiles that can be avoided by simply running around in circles. The pitfalls make these projectiles easy to cheese, as the animation of getting out the hole provides many iframes. The more difficult thing about this fight is actually hitting Holly, as she runs away to the other side of the stage very quickly, and most of the time chasing her will result in the player falling in a hole, which consumes a bit of time. This cat and mouse game, while slightly long, isn't too difficult, nor is it unfair. For what it is, it's decent, and it's not stupid simple like Dr. Peace, and it's not cheesable like Destroy Man. Once again, I think the main gripe I have with this fight is the need to chase down Holly, but I get why they did it, as otherwise this fight would just be a more gimmicky reskin of the second boss fight. Also, this is the only fight where I encountered a game-breaking glitch, as sometimes when she'd get on the rocks to do her projectile barrage, I'd fall into the hole, which not only would make me immune to anything, it would also make her no-clip into the rock, which made the both of us invincible for a few seconds. After a confusing fight, Travis hesitates to game end the 6th ranked assassin. She tells him that in this business, assassins must die when they lose, and that if he doesn't have the balls to kill a woman, he's even more pathetic than a lowly thug. Fortunately for him, she admits that she has a thing for pathetic men like him. She adds that when he hesitated to game end her, he felt this embrace, and before moving on, she demands that he never forgets her in one of the most cinematic moments in the game. The shot of the two assassins having one last conversation on the beach feels straight out of a western, as while it doesn't take place in the desert, there seems to be no civilization around these two characters despite the fight taking place on a city beach. The way this scene is shot adds weight to Holly's words, as despite having lost, she's filmed in a way that almost makes her equal to Travis. When she demands to never forget her, the player can't make out Travis's facial expression, but judging by his usual reactions, he must be having a hard time keeping a poker face. Surely enough, when she commits Sudoku, he's at a loss for words, and the only thing he can do is hold her lifeless body. I love this moment, as for what may be the first time Travis meets someone who showed him a genuine form of empathy, even if it lasted mere seconds. Even if he's ranked 6th, this death obviously damages his psyche, which is something that Sylvia notices as she tries to move on from this fight as soon as possible. Keep in mind that at this point, Travis didn't even know her name, which makes him question his decisions even further. If it's possible that someone like that shows him empathy despite seeing him as a number, is he right to believe that everyone is out to get him? Travis lives alone. He has no real friends except that guy Bishop who brings his bike, and while shopkeepers know him, the only living thing ever seen in his apartment besides him is his cat Jean. This raises questions about why Travis is even going through with all of this. Does he want a one-night stand with Sylvia, or is he actually seeking someone to grow old with? Bringing it back to the beach though, Travis asks for the previous 6th ranked assassin's name, and when Sylvia starts to give him more information, he interrupts her and leaves, as he now feels like he's made an irreversible mistake. While game-ending Dr. Peace took a small toll on him, this battle has given him a lot to think about, and so this level ends with Travis once again questioning where he stands on all of this assassin business. It's a wonderful contrast to him at the start of the level, and while it is a drastic change, it's presented in such a way that it almost makes him believable and natural. To add insult to injury, Holly is the first person Travis actually buries right after telling her body that he loved her soul. Call it cheesy or whatever you want, but I really like how much depth they're giving this Johnny Knoxville insert. The sentimental moment doesn't last too long, however, as a new sword can now be purchased, and my headcanon for it is that they took Holly's prosthetic leg and made it a new weapon. You could see it as Travis honoring her memory, but I'd like to believe that if they did in fact take Holly's leg, he wouldn't know about it because it might genuinely make him depressed to a dangerous extent. Neo's quote-unquote normal job consists of minesweeping, except instead of a grid, it's the beach, and the risks are actually getting blown up. This has nothing to do with the story, I just love how deeply unserious the game can be at times, especially after having such emotional moments. If this is tonal whiplash, then I'm a masochist. The phone call this time completely negates the effects of the previous fight, as Travis is on his nonchalant shenanigans arc while Sylvia is out in Ibiza. Travis, I love you, man, but come on. Trying to become a Sigma male will not get you snow bunny action. Luckily for us, the road to the next ranked fight is marked in puddles of blood on the road, meaning that surely we can't get lost. This mysterious blood is wonderful, as not only does it create anticipation for the next boss that we currently have no information on, it also serves as a reminder that Travis is in too deep at this point, and that after ending Holly Summers, he can never go back to being how he was at the start of the game. In a way, Holly was a milestone even more important than a simple ranking. This trail of blood leads you to a bunker of sorts in the middle of a field. Near the entrance of the bunker is a body, which really helps sell the point that this next opponent has to be feared because he's a sociopath who isn't willing to hide it. The blood splattered around the city must mean that this next assassin is really going to give Travis a run for his money. Even more than Shinobu, perhaps. The start of this level has such an oppressive atmosphere, it's the complete opposite of the previous one. The setting is a never-ending tunnel a la creatively named Infinite Tunnel from Yokai Watch 2 with Silent Hill graphics. To make this place even weirder, the first few enemies flee from Travis after seeing him draw his beam katana. You move forward and that's when you come face to face with him. The Benadryl coat man. The rest of this level is just Travis chasing down this figure down the narrow and seemingly ever-growing tunnel while also having to take down a few enemies on the way. All the enemies in the tunnel have lightsabers, and this is the first time that this happens, as usually sword-wielding enemies are the toughest ones to get rid of and they're implemented in moderation. The coat man keeps moving, always being 2 steps ahead, yet being patient enough to watch as Travis game ends the enemy goons. While this level is doing an amazing job at creating a mysterious atmosphere, what takes away from this eeriness is the track playing. While it's not the original Cashmere Cannonball, it still has the same melody and manages to pump up the player. It's not a bad track by any means, I just don't think it's implemented that effectively. This next boss seems to be very powerful, judging by the goons he's employed, and if he is the coat man, he should definitely be feared. The pre-boss section consists of only chasing the coat man, game-ending goons, and cranking that saber. While it's stupid simple with no gimmicks, I love the mystery being created here, and I like how it seems like there's no escape, as render distances always make it look like you're as far from the entrance as you are from the exit. I also like the added detail of being able to lock into the coat man, showing that he is actually in the room and not the consequences of Benadryl. This 5th rank assassin must be a really powerful guy, and the coat man has disappeared now that Sylvia is calling. Maybe he was just a figment of Travis's imagination. This phone call is the usual shit talking with the added detail of mentioning that Travis has been slacking off a bit lately. Don't read too much into it, as it's probably just euphemism for sex. So as you leave the tunnel and are ready to head to the next zone, you're in some Evangelion looking place that's just never mentioned again. So that's cool. This white zone then becomes a road in the desert where Travis comes face to face with the 5th rank guy whose huge contraption is raring to go. No fight has parodied mecha anime so far, so I'm excited to see how this one goes. Maybe Travis will go Super Saiyan in this one, considering how excited he is to start the fight. This guy looks really powerful and he has a super long cutscene. This may actually be the hardest fight. Yeah, and he's dead. That's right, we get our first and only fake out boss in the game, and this guy gets game ended by the coat man we've been chasing. Turns out he is real, and he's a physical manifestation of my Fortnite squad mates who steal my kills. Travis watches in awe as this random guy just stole his kill and reacts accordingly. The 2 men begin to spar after Travis tries to imitate an accent I don't think I recognize, but Henry Gallagher and Travis Touchy are cockblocked by Sylvia, who states that they can't legally fight as they aren't registered. So Travis is now ranked 5th, which he hates because he feels like he doesn't deserve it. Even if he's becoming more sadistic, he still has some standards that he will adhere to. Unfortunately for him, Sir Henry Motherfucker, as he's affectionately called by the fanbase, is nowhere to be seen, and Travis goes back somewhat defeated. Am I slightly disappointed that the devs didn't lean more into how this previous fight affected Travis's psyche? Of course. But I get that the people wanted a 3D brawler featuring a charismatic hero who whips out one-liners every other sentence. Even if this more emotional side to Travis is put in the backseat, I'm glad that we got a glimpse into it. My game theory is that if we don't get moments like the burial again, it's probably because Travis has been hardened by the experience. So yes, I do know that maybe the reason why the rest of the game features a more bloodthirsty Travis is because he never wants to look back on the man he was before. Maybe game-ending Holly Summers was the final straw, and if he wants to get to first rank, he wants to do it right, which also explains why he's so pissed about Sir Henry Motherfucker's intervention. As per usual, there's not much to know here in the period between boss fights, and I know I should have put this before when discussing the bike for the first time, but it was at rank 5 where I discovered that drifting actually replenishes the nitro bar on the Speltiger. This mechanic paired with a narrow street set up like any other North American urban center means that drifting will be the optimal way to go. The bike drifts at these 90-degree angles, which do feel awkward at first, but if mastered, you can basically move around without letting go of the nitro button, which makes getting around Santa Destroy so much faster. This, like most mechanics in this game, such as wrestling moves, are optional, but they add so much to the personality and quality of life in this game. While it's very out there and extravagant, game dev is still game dev, and I like how the developers almost force the player to learn to drift in order to optimize playthroughs of the game. This phone call starts off with yet another appearance of nonchalant Travis, as he's seemingly about to go off on a rant about how it doesn't even matter anymore if he knows his next opponent. This facade quickly disappears when she informs him that they're going to a show together. Upon realizing that this is in fact a date, Travis becomes mommy's good kitty boy and quickly heads toward the next battle. I like the detail of having the letter with the ticket to the show appear beneath Travis's motel door right as the call ends, as it enforces the association's power because they seemingly control so much of the city from the shadows. Not only does it make Sylvia and her colleagues more threatening, it also makes Travis feel much smaller in comparison, as it really shows that even if he did want to leave the assassin business, he'd immediately fail, seeing as the association knows where he lives and watches his every move. While the association hasn't shown any hostility towards Travis so far, there's always that thought in the back of the player's mind that fears what they may do if Travis were to defect in a typical Californian dude bro fashion. This level starts off really well, as it's in the same metro station as the Destroy Lonely fight, but this all falls apart immediately as the slow and eerie approach to the metro station is replaced by an intense fight all the way to the train itself. Instead of having a toll booth be a checkpoint, Travis can go back and forth undisturbed and even use it to his advantage by trapping his opponents in a certain place to game end them. The music is also very much present here, which makes sense considering Travis isn't alone anymore. While I prefer the Metro segment in the Destroy Man fight, I still do enjoy this fight, thematically speaking, as it effectively is a complete inversion of the 7th rank fight. Back then, Travis was more careful in his approach to rank fights, as he may have feared death, but after game ending such irredeemable people, he's realized that this assassin's life is too short to be wasted on being careful. Also, he has a date, so he's more excited about that and won't hesitate to get through anything if it means he can get some play tonight. I think this not necessarily lack of fear, but more carelessness is perfectly exemplified with how unimportant the tollgate is anymore, as Travis doesn't need to take his time. He knows that he's become a more formidable fighter, and all the goons that stand in his path are nothing but stepladders in his way to getting a date. Where the previous Metro level had most of the fighting being done on the train itself, here the train features a dream sequence in which Travis plays an arcade game in his head, completely inversing the situation from the Destroy Man fight, signifying that all the trains are belong to Travis. Now, I'm obviously very good at the bird level in Cuphead and Toho games in general, so I didn't die with a score of 21,000. Not at all. For some reason, the level got the memo on how to make effective subway levels as the dream sequence ends and Travis leads to a completely empty station devoid of any music. This tension, if you can even call it that, is interrupted by a phone call where for once Sylvia isn't shit-talking Travis, instead opting to flirt and encourage him. How wholesome. Could this finally be the night where Travis gets the snow bunny? Weirdly enough, it seems to be that way. Sylvia is truly one of the most enigmatic characters, as she didn't need to motivate Travis even more, and she knows it. Could her feelings for him actually be genuine, or is this another one of her schemes to manipulate him even later down the line? Only time will tell, as Travis makes his way out of the station, only to enter the cutscene where voice acting peaked in my opinion. Travis's reactions to anything Sylvia says are actually all peak, just see for yourself.
Oh, you're serious? I wouldn't do that if I were you. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. I'm packing heat, baby.
Wow.
The next boss is Balan Wonderworld. There is no good way to put it. It's also here that we learn that Travis is an orphan. Trust me, this is very important for later. This cutscene where Travis still talks Harvey Wonderworld, despite being strapped up, really plays up the Johnny Knoxville influence, which I am a huge fan of, as it really makes him so charismatic. While some could argue that he's faking bravado to impress his date, I genuinely don't think that's the case. At this point, I genuinely don't think he fears death, at least for himself. He has no family left, no real friends, and he's confident in his skills to the point where he believes himself to be invincible. Call it an Icarus complex, but that's just what being a true blue American hero is all about. This fight is not that hard, as Harvey doesn't have many iframes, but if you're into gimmicks for whatever masochistic reasons, this fight is full of them. So this guy has a few attacks, including the regular swordsman slash, but he also has access to projectiles in the form of birds and a spinning attack where he knocks you out after making a live action Beyblade. So far this is pretty manageable, as all the attacks can be read or dodged pretty easily. The worst part of this fight is the Super Smash Bros. Spear Pillar Palkia gimmick where the screen and controls are inverted. This is manageable for the most part, but as his HP drops, he uses his ability more often, which just becomes awful to play through. His special attack comes in the form of a blue light that chases the player around. If they are to get caught in this spotlight, Travis will be forced into a box and will have to pass a QTE to get out. During this fight, I was also listening to Pink Season, so I did miss the box QTE twice, making me fail this fight twice. So quick pro gamer tip, lock in for QTEs. Who knew? At least Travis got the girl in the end though. Again, this fight wasn't hard, not at all. The main issue was the gimmick of having the screen invert and the heat-seeking blue spotlight. Now, I get why they did it, considering he was a magician and there wasn't a token gimmicky boss fight, but I'd have to say that this is a perfectly average level, heavily carried by the pre-boss fight cutscene simply because of the voice acting. A strange detail was that Sylvia just watched as these two men fought to death. She joins Travis on the stage later on as the two share their first kiss, but what was the point of her even being there? She brought Travis to the fight under the pretense that they were invited to a show, but why was she there for the actual fight? Keep in mind, this is the only time that this happens, as usually she swiftly arrives after the fight. Why was she here for this fight specifically? Why is she rewarding Travis when he's only ranked 4th? Well, dear viewer, you'll be happy to know that this is never answered. Unfortunately, for as wonderful as this game is, there are quite a few loose threads that I'm sure you won't even notice if you're not annoying. But for a game that prides itself on having such well-written characters, especially Travis, I do wish this part of the game was elaborated on. I guess that if life was perfect though, Holly Summers would still be alive and Travis wouldn't be getting it on with the Makima of the No More Heroes verse. At least Travis got what he wanted. I wonder how they're going to make him suffer now. It's also important to note that in this half of the game, the bosses seem to be less developed as characters. While they didn't have much to begin with, starting from the 5th rank fight, the bosses seem to have just one main gimmick as a character trait. Let's Shake had his goon machine, and Harvey was a showman through and through. He didn't care much for what he did, but as long as it was show-worthy, he was happy. Unfortunately, his last show had less people than the premiere of the Borderlands movie.
Wow, the big three. J. Cole, Kendrick, and Drake really have changed, haven't they?
Right after saving the progress of getting to a new rank, normally Travis receives a call from Beefhead Videos, the Blockbuster equivalent, telling him to return one of their tapes. The tape is an innuendo, and it really shows how lonely and depraved Travis is. Not only are all of these tapes overdue, but he's hoarding supposedly many of them. This joke phone call is then followed by a more formal one from the association, which gives him the details about the fee for the next fight while remaining polite. This phone call call is completely different, however, as it urges Travis to pay ASAP instead of simply suggesting it in a more passive-aggressive manner. This hints that after getting with Sylvia, Travis took a small break from the game ending to actually enjoy life. Unfortunately for him, slacking off to Goon isn't a part of the deal, so he has to lock in and game end these 3 last bosses. This change of pace is reflected in the phone call between our lovebirds after paying the entrance fee, as for once they're actually treating each other as equals. Travis's tone seems to be especially calm and casual, while Sylvia seems to genuinely show concern over the phone as she asks Travis to survive. Either she's actually caught feelings for him, or he's being manipulated yet again. The ambiguity created when Travis doesn't respond to her demand is almost discomforting, as it's an omen of what's to come. Both of these assassins know that it's almost over, and the fact that the next assassin is a witch located in an entirely different city means that Travis will be on his own completely. If Sylvia actually cares about Travis and he knows it, the stakes are so much higher as she loses a partner while he dies just as he found a reason to live. It's not that he wanted to die previously, it's just that there weren't many reasons not to die, if you know what I mean. The letter this time contains a bus ticket and seems to be written by Sylvia as it urges Travis to come back alive, which proves my point of the stakes being that much higher from here on out. It's a nice and welcome change of pace, to be honest. The level doesn't reflect this jump in stakes at the start, but quickly ramps up in difficulty as most of it takes place in a moving bus. The fight in the bus is by far one of the best segments in the game simply because of how limited you are in movement. Even more than on the metro, meaning that you either have to be efficient with your attacks or you have to be generally competent against the crowd. While I was getting better at the combat aspect of the game, there were still times when fighting all those people was overwhelming and I almost ended up dying. The segment doesn't give the player much time to breathe as an onslaught of enemies keep appearing at a seemingly endless rate, but it does force the player to get good. The camera angle is a bit awkward, sure, and at times it would be nice to breathe, but the bus doesn't overstay its welcome because this game is surprisingly very good at pacing segments. I really enjoy how this part makes it feel like the stakes are higher for Travis, as he's now confronted with more people that could game end him as he's just getting what he wanted. The constant onslaught of goons makes Travis's battle feel like life or death situations. This isn't to say that previously it didn't feel that way, but being forced to stay on the bus doesn't allow for a flight response. This is also a nice transition into the big 3 as the player is seemingly getting a taste of what's to come going forward. Unfortunately, this seems to be lightning in a bottle, but I'll comment more on that in a bit. The phone call is incredibly confusing as Sylvia once again shit talks him and basically tells him that he was a one-night stand. I guess the letter and the previous phone call, along with the kiss and the show, were all just a part of a more complicated scheme to get Travis to actually fight his next opponent. Either she's the original Makima or the writers forgot. Take your pick. In Iiyoshi Speed City, where the next fight takes place, Travis sees his master get game ended by a giant laser in a duel. I'm 90% sure that the cat that indirectly caused his death was Jean, Travis's cat, which, if it is the case, that just means that Travis witnessed his master get game ended because of him in the most roundabout way. This is one of the only times we see the master, so we don't get much context as to who he was and the type of training he gave Travis, but at least it's nice to have a in-universe explanation as to why Travis is so good with a sword. His master gives a few inspiring words before going out, and this inevitably traumatizes our deeply confused protagonist even more. After seeing his master die at the hands of the average Walmart enjoyer, Travis lets out his inner Jesse Pinkman and we get to experience another battle driven by bloodlust rather than regular lust for a woman who seems to have commitment issues. The fight itself is following the trend of having gimmicky bosses, as the simplest way to explain this fight is Squid Game red light green light, but if you get caught, you're blasted with Mega Laser. While it's good to introduce variety in terms of boss fight, as no other boss has had this contraption in a long abandoned street, the lack of actual contact with the boss is underwhelming, especially with how enraged Travis must be in the moment. There's not really much to say on the boss fight itself, as it's actually just the Squid Game obstacle, except it's in Eastern Europe and there are a few goons to mow through. The laser is incredibly strong as it basically game ends Travis in one go, showing that this boss is strong in universe. But once again, we don't get to see the assassin herself much, as for the entire fight we have to battle the goons and escape the laser. While the witch got the ending she very much deserved, I do wish they made the game ending even more extreme to reflect the emotions Travis is feeling at this point in the game. Before the fight began, the boss called Travis an idiot who doesn't care about his own life, which is being put into question now. Back at the motel, I would have told you that this was incorrect as Travis now has Sylvia to live for, but seeing as she kind of dumped him and his father figure got game ended 10 minutes ago, Travis is conflicted about whether or not he should keep living. While she didn't show much witch-like aspect, she did seem to know that Travis was going through an existential crisis at the time and made it easier for him after the fight when she just accepted her fate. Good on you, American woman, you get a gold star. As a third-ranked assassin, Sigma Travis returns and doesn't even question the fact that he has to game end 2 others. He just goes on as if nothing happened. It's Doomer time, baby. Only 2 more to go. The phone call this time around isn't even a phone call. It's a letter from a carrier pigeon that tells Travis the next fight will be at the Destroy Stadium and that he shouldn't look for Sylvia. At this point, she probably knows that just letting him hear her voice will get in the way of his rise to the top, so she opts to actually avoid him. It doesn't help that the association is increasingly dry with him too. While normally Travis would still have his cat to turn to, I'm pretty sure that she was there to help game in his master, so for the first time in the game, Travis is truly alone. This doesn't matter too much though, as the fight is available as a distraction very quickly. I always wondered why we could jump with a bike, so now I'm happy that we actually get to use that function in a, useful way. Even if the instruction to jump suddenly appearing took me out of the game slightly, the transition from open world to stadium fight immediately gives a sense of urgency that was never really present previously in the game. Except, all those times where it actually did. For as intense as the fight on the baseball field was, it was refreshing to be able to fend off against so many people in a large open area, making a battle that on paper would be repetitive and tedious much more enjoyable and challenging. The last part where you're facing off against all the gunmen is a terrible America simulator though, and it gets annoying very quickly. And no, I don't want some sugar. Sylvia is very much alive, and I'm still sure that she just wanted to avoid Travis as much as possible just to make sure that he would go through with the next battle. She's aware that she's losing power over him, so she's conserving whatever's left of it for the most important moments. We all know that rarity drives desire. Look, I've tried to avoid it as much as I could, but I'm going to use my Danganronpa reference of the video to say that Bad Girl is literally a caricature of a Danganronpa character. Just, put her with the remnants of despair and she will fit right in. The whole setting with the human batting cage is reminiscent of a Danganronpa execution for lack of better references, and falling for her tricks does leave you to be batted to death, which is surprisingly tame. This fight took me so long because I didn't understand that at this point I was supposed to have a better sword. Also, I was probably tired from playing this game at 3 AM, so before you tell me to get good, I have an excuse. This is the fight that actually made me check out Dr. Naomi's lab and purchase upgrades because I was struggling too much. Again, I have an excuse. I took a break from playing this game during this fight, but when I re-attempted the fight, I learned that I could just do the field part on my bike, which made the whole segment much easier, though less satisfying. It is nice to feel this powerful in a game that still usually gives the player an innate edge over enemies. It wasn't so bad without the bike, but it was most definitely a handicap looking back on it now. I think taking a 1-week break was a good thing, as I beat the boss fight pretty easily and got the weird over-the-top Danganronpa-esque ending to this fight. I think it's funny that out of all the imposing and skilled fighters Travis has fought so far, the one that he struggled the most with was Bad Girl. Sure, she's ranked second, making her one of the most skilled out there, but it's funny to think that someone as immoral and insane as Bad Girl can have so much power in Sana Destroy.
This is fucking bullshit.
The fight is supposed to be a no-nonsense fight to the death. However, the main gimmick is the nicely dressed people she fires at you in her batting cage. This is one of the rare cases in which the boss AI can completely ruin the flow of a fight. The guys she sent aren't really hard to get rid of, and the main difficulty of this fight comes in the form of the fast attacks that are harder to read than most bosses, but the AI can make her spam this attack like there's no tomorrow, effectively making her invincible for extended periods of time, which allows for near zero damage to be done. There are less iframes than Shinobu's boss fight, but Bad Girl can quickly get the upper hand if not careful, especially if the player decides to rush an attack, because waiting for her can sometimes get too long. Another one of her main gimmicks is playing a helpless girl, which really helps bring her closer to Junko Enoshima, as if Travis, being the chivalrous gentleman he is, falls into her trap, she beats him to death. There's no getting around this attack, and the only thing you can do is watch from a safe distance. It gives the player time to breathe, sure, but it also slows down the fight immensely, especially because this attack is used a lot more often later on, just like the Gimp attack. Do you see where I'm going with this? While at first the fight is fair, later on Bad Girl uses her attacks in a way that makes it like she's exploiting the system. Call it poor game design, but this cheating is so much in character for her. She's established that game-ending people is part of her daily grind, and like Destroy Man before her, she has no problems getting her hands dirty if it means she can win. While this fight isn't as hard so much as it is long, it does help build the narrative that as the ranks get closer to the top, the assassins are more depraved and immoral. While all the previous bosses were psychotic in their own way, Bad Girl is like the twisted extreme of the assassin. Compare her to Ganondorf, who while still being a killer had some decency. Bad Girl is one of the most detestable characters who is barely even human at this point. Whereas other assassins had names, she's just known as Bad Girl because that's her entire identity at this point. While Travis has faced depravity previously, she's the first person he meets who truly encapsulates that. Sure, the previous assassin had no name either, but she was an elderly woman who, let's be honest, was probably going to die soon. Bad Girl is, well, a girl. She has her whole life ahead of her, and she's already fallen so far. This is a perfect cautionary tale for Travis, as he realizes that this bloodlust will only lead him to a point comparable to Bad Girl. This is seen in her last moments alive, where he basically gives up to give her the win. While he wants to obtain the first rank, the last thing he wants to do is become as deranged as her. Unfortunately, he's obtained her rank, and he still has more to do before being done completely. He doesn't have time to think about the future though, as he notes to himself that he barely made it out of that fight alive. All the ranked assassins so far have given Travis a lot to think about with their different motivations and approaches to being an assassin, though I think that this one marked him even more than Holly Summers. Not because he felt bad about taking another person's life, but because for once a mirror was held up to him and it showed what he could potentially become if he didn't set himself on the right track. I think him being so exhausted after the fight reflects that, as he doesn't want to have to think about that possibility. Unlike the multiple boss fights, he's finally avoiding confrontation and simply accepts that he may have gone too far. The main takeaway from this fight is that the bike, while not mandatory, helps not only to make it easier, as most enemies can be one-shotted, but it also saves up a lot of time and makes the pacing much better. While once again I will say that upgrades aren't necessary to beat the game, they do help, and I would recommend getting new swords, especially for these last two fights in the game. While it does require grinding and repeating jobs, some jobs, especially the assassin gig number 20, are fantastic to earn more money. It was also after this fight that I started to ask myself what bosses do when not in a fight. Do they just stay in their own little arenas, or could these rank fights have taken place somewhere else on any other day? Food for thought. Even Beefhead Videos has a sense of finality when they call Travis about the tapes he needs to return, as they inform him that his membership is now suspended unless he returns the tape about the French maid. The association, while still colder than usual, does wish Travis a pleasant day, so at least they have that going for them this time. The phone call before the fight is with Sylvia's mother, surprisingly, as instead of answering, Travis takes the initiative and calls directly. She reveals that the Assassins organization is not real and that Travis has game-ended all of these people for practically nothing. Like others before him, he's been played by the hot white girl, just like another protagonist in one of my favorite pieces of media. Even though it's all been one big family vlog channel prank on Travis, he still decides to go for rank 1, which is questionable, but sure, I guess. Let's not let the goop shed go to waste. This is such a good moment because Travis panics for the first time in the game, and understandably so, as this huge rug has been pulled from under his feet. While this twist would be nice to believe, as it really puts everything into question, the way Sylvia's mom still urges Travis to continue fighting is incredibly suspicious, and I think it makes Travis's following actions even harder to understand. Nothing seems to make sense anymore, as the line that divides the real from the fake has been blurred to a sickening extent. It's after this phone call, however, that we finally get to live the full California experience, as our bike is stolen, meaning that we have to walk to the next ranked fight. What a great time to breathe in fresh air and also perhaps ponder on what exactly just happened. Travis finally gets to his bike, and now he has to follow some other bikers on the highway because that's right, No More Heroes was actually the shitty road trip sequel to your favorite movie, Last Action Hero. If Bad Girl taught the player to jump with their bike, Darkstar teaches the player to actually drive. Not only do you have to dodge all of these strategically placed boxes on the highway while game-ending random bikers on the way, you also have to jump over fallen trees and dodge huge lasers in the forest section. This adds to the whole pre-boss fight on your bike gimmick, except this time you're actually using the bike on a road instead of the Destroy Stadium, so the years of practice from following traffic laws in GTA are actually paying off now. Call it cheesy or a cliche, but the gap jump over the bridge was really well made cinematically speaking and stylistically fitting. The driving part of the level doesn't really need much elaboration as it's really just that. It does feel nice to have a somewhat logical conclusion to the increased amount of driving content that was being presented to the player though. This content being the Destroy Stadium Massacre and the ramp jump third-rate job. Lucky for us, this final level has actually pre-boss combat, so as you crash your bike into a Silent Hill haunted forest and after seeing a ghost, you're put back into regularly scheduled traditional No More Heroes swordplay. During this fight, I made the mistake of going back after running into 4 TIE fighters, which made me go back to the start of the Resident Evil Village map, so I knew I had to lock in. I'm glad that this portion of the level exists because it actually adds difficulty to the final level. After game ending a few more TIE fighters, Ghost Asian Travolta turns into a letter that reads, Travis, that path of man is not path of beasts. Do you understand? You know your edge can be poisoned or cured. To be learned is the path, and to be ignorant is also the path. Your path is that! A path that no one, nothing can pass. Yet the path goes on. Devotion is only given to those who perfect single thing. Reward then. No reward those who do not perfect. Does a reward or just evil lie down your path? Fight until you die, Travis. Signed by Thunder Ryu. It then hit me that Asian Travolta was actually Travis's master who appeared in 3 frames then got game ended by Walmart Woman. Rest in peace, Thunder Ryu, the goat of Santa Destroy. In this final pre-shit phone call, Sylvia insults Travis before complimenting him again, revealing that she was never really into him, but also it could be argued that she was? I know I've referenced it before, but this is literally just Rose and Get Out. Come on. I know the relationship between Travis and Sylvia is one of the main draws, especially when it comes to characterization in these games, but I really wish that this phone call was less ambiguous and actually gave the player a straight answer when it came to Sylvia's feelings, especially when everything else has arrived with such a strong sense of finality. The letter from Ryu is one that basically gives the player a life lesson because at this point even he knows the game is almost over. Yes, it seems like Sylvia is in love with Travis, judging by how she ends the call, but with her, you can never know. After the phone call, the lack of music and the use of ambient nature sounds like bird calls and rustling leaves really helps drive the point that Travis is fighting for himself now. While he's the protagonist, calling him a hero is very questionable. While he's not a psychopath by any means, his motivations for becoming an assassin were inherently selfish, and now that he knows he's not getting with Sylvia, it just means that he's going to fight in order to fight. In a way, he has taken Bad Girl's place as he's now a second-ranked assassin who is partaking in her quote-unquote daily grind. The final boss arena is actually just the album cover for Me Fi Me's One album. Like, I wish I was joking, but Darth Touchdown might actually be him in a parallel universe. This game is one that wears its references on its sleeve. I know I've not talked about them a lot because I didn't think they'd fit in with the rest of the video, but I think that this last fight is a perfect example of this. In an interview, Suda51 has stated that No More Heroes' story is loosely based off a Western film, El Topo, and this last arena is incredibly reminiscent of that movie. If you have time to watch the movie, you'll immediately see all the things that inspired the game, as trust me, it's very apparent when you compare the two. Not only is this level a huge love letter to that movie, it is also largely inspired by Star Wars, as the final boss, Dark Star, tries to convince our protagonist that he's in fact the father. This is probably more parody than the El Topo love letter the rest of the game has been, but Star Wars gets some love too in the form of lightsabers seen throughout the game, and more notably the way Sylvia asks Travis to trust his force before every boss fight. This game, while parodying a lot of things, also shows genuine appreciation for so many different pieces of media and just video games in general. The shirts that can be bought to customize Travis are all fan-submitted designs in a way to involve the community more. No More Heroes at its core is a character-driven 3D brawler, but it is also a love letter to so many other things. But enough of the glazing, let's actually get back to the fight. Travis is then convinced by his quote-unquote father that he needs to find his parents' killer, only for him to be game-ended by woman? I guess it was unexpected to have two fake-out bosses in the same game, even if it is underwhelming for a final boss. In this meta moment, we hear the woman yap for a long time while Travis just makes YouTuber thumbnail faces. Turns out, they're siblings. Who knew? It's also a funny coincidence that the sister has the same name as the cat Jean. Rewind a bit though, because I struggled a lot on this fight, meaning that I had to finally buy the next Tsubaki upgrade. Little did I know that I would completely lose access to my bike, making the grind to earn money to buy the Tsubaki even worse. I eventually got it though, and managed to get back on the mission, only to hit every tree in the forest section and mess up the bridge jump in one of my favorite blackouts in the game. I got past the bike section on my second attempt and speed ran through the woods. The Tsubaki Mark III is actually a godsend, bless the green allegory. Turns out the fight was much easier with the upgrades as I blew through Jean without much trouble. The fight is even less gimmicky as the special thing about Jean is that she can dodge attacks. Like Sans. She moves really fast, which was annoying for the first 6 times, but quickly becomes manageable like all boss fights. Unfortunately, I still think Shinobu is the hardest fight in the game. Sure, my sword was worse, but even on a second playthrough, you'll find out why in a moment, Shinobu gave me the hardest time. The fake-out Travis death at the end was also unexpected, and I thought I accidentally died, but when Shinobu came, my hope in humanity was once again restored. Travis game ends his sister, who begs him to be spared, but he still goes on to be ranked number 1, calling out Sylvia immediately after. This fight actually helps clarify a lot while also leaving the player with even bigger questions. For a quick summary, turns out Jean game ended the touchdown parents one day, which drove Travis to want to become an assassin to get revenge on his sister. One day he was drunk in a bar and rambled about his sister to Sylvia, who convinced him that she could help him get even if he followed her. She essentially scammed him for $3,150,000 and made him game end countless people in what may be the most convoluted scam to date. While it's very cool to think about how this reveal could affect Travis's thinking, it also makes zero sense and there were no hints towards this whatsoever. Additionally, it raises so many questions about Jean as she was never named previously besides the whole cat thing. So, while I'm all for extremes in this game, the whole plot twist was so incomprehensible that I just can't take it seriously. Jean's backstory is actually tragic, so it's hilarious that Travis would react this way to life-changing news. To make things even more confusing, Sylvia walks out from one of the pillars right after the fight, but before anything can happen, we go back to the motel's bathroom where a save is prompted. You get 3 options: to return to Santa Destroy, view the ending, or view the real ending, which was unavailable to me. I pressed to view the ending, and I'm happy to say that one of my previous questions was answered, as while taking a shit, Travis is ambushed by an assassin who I presume wants to become first ranked. We don't know what happens next, but I assume he survives considering the franchise continues with him at the head of it. But the ending is inconclusive, meaning that that's right, we now have to unlock the real ending. See, normally this is where I'd include an interview with a dev or something like that in order to get clarification on the ending of the game, but since I don't have networking capabilities or the money, I figured I'd do the next best thing and interview Travis Touchdown himself. This is what remains of my interview. Please enjoy. Look, I know you wanted answers, but it's still too early in its life cycle to actually converse. We can't get anything significant out of it as of right now, and I'm sure you're aware of what happens if we let it grow. We're at a bit of an impasse here, sir. Right. I'm aware of how pressed we are for time, yes. Yes. I'll get right back to it. My apologies, sir. Yeah, so, safe to say that he died in that bathroom. The hood lost a real one today. The game tells you that you've cleared it, which struck fear in me, as does this mean that I now have to replay the entire game to get a different ending? I guess so. So I picked the same difficulty, and the game starts off in the exact same way as Travis recounts his first night with Sylvia, blah blah blah. You've seen this all before. The main difference here is that you have a cooler sword and lots of money, making this a multiverse story, as the new Travis retains all earthly possessions from his previous counterpart. Don't you love existential horror and somewhat lazy trends? The whole game plays out in the exact same way, and the only thing I have to note is that, well, I died at Shinobu again. Even if I had better sword, better drip, more skills, the fight is still a very good fight. I enjoy it. That's pretty much it. Turns out, to get the real ending of the game, all I had to do was buy every beam katana model. But I skipped out on the first purchasable one apparently, which meant that I didn't have the option to get the real ending. Yeah. So the real ending starts off in the exact same way, except Henry game ends the bald assassin who tried to jump Travis in the bathroom. When Travis thanks him, he just tells him that he's a disgrace to everyone he's killed and tells Travis to meet in the parking lot, Waffle House style. Travis promptly dresses himself and heads outside, where the battle immediately begins. This is the secret final boss fight, and for as cool as the battle with this pompous prick may be in concept, it's actually pretty easy, as most of his attacks can be countered pretty easily and his movements aren't that fast. I'm pretty sure that this is also a joke ending, except it ties the loose thread with Sylvia and it reveals that Henry is Travis's twin brother, so I don't know anymore. Turns out Henry and Sylvia are married and have been for the last 10 years, and she's just been scamming random men in that time. I guess this game was actually just a very elaborate episode of the TV show Punk'd. The game ends with the two brothers duking it out while the credits play. It's safe to say that this game ends like a Fast and Furious flick. With the main story over, one question still remains. Is Travis redeemable, seeing as he had such nuance? Fucking no, have you seen the guy? He either game-ended people for revenge or out of pure lust. Both of these motivations are selfish, and he went about it the wrong way. Even if he wanted to game-end Gene in the first place, he didn't have to take care of the other assassins. The guy is selfish from the start, doesn't know why he's doing what he does, and is bad at justifying it when he does. So no, Travis is completely irredeemable. You think showing remorse when game-ending someone is enough to make you redeemable? That just makes you human, so no, irredeemable. Travis is for sure going to hell. Lol. No More Heroes is many things. A philosophical game is probably not one of those. Sure, Travis Touchdown is a very layered character who is incredibly well written, but the game he's in doesn't allow for a lot of that characterization to shine. Don't get me wrong, the characters in this game have many merits, as the important ones each have complex motivations and interactions, but the setting and story of the game doesn't allow that to be the main focus. So why is No More Heroes as good as I make it out to be? Why is it that among all the 3D brawlers or hack and slash game of the 2000s, this is the one that got all the ports and sequels? Well, the main focus of the game is making an over-the-top gory story that references so many things while also innovating in literally every way possible. No More Heroes succeeds in many things, one of them being an amazing combat system that manages to be easy enough to get into while still remaining complex enough to warrant experimentation and at least a second playthrough. Unfortunately, I played No More Heroes on a Switch and not a Wii, so I didn't get to use motion control sword, which was the original gimmick that probably added another layer of depth to the combat, but the fact that I still love the combat really says a lot. Another way this game succeeds is by creating a gameplay loop where most of the information is obtained diegetically. It's safe to say that this game is really good at immersing the player into its world. The characters and story, while still being simple, have enough substance to warrant video essays being made about most of it. The pacing in this game being this good shows that the creators are very well versed in all forms of media, and the multiple references to other franchises is a testament to that. It's clear that everyone involved was passionate about this project, as no corners were cut and every aspect of the game is oozing with its signature style. No More Heroes is incredibly recognizable despite having to compete with things like Mad World or Dead Rising, which really proves just how much this game cares about its style. It doesn't substitute style for substance either, as proven previously. While the game was made in 2007 and references so many things, it hasn't aged poorly at all. Travis is still as compelling as he was 17 years ago, and the references don't immediately tell you that this game was made in the mid-2000s. Even the way in which these characters talk hasn't aged at all, despite new words being made pretty much every day. I know I'm glazing this game like it's quite literally the second coming of Christ, but I want you to know that this is by no means a perfect game. It's an amazing amazing game, yes, but for as wacky as it is, the linearity of the story makes for almost no replay value. It's not like Slay the Princess where the whole game is centered around replays, so at most you'll sink 15 to 20 hours into the game. Lucky for us though, there are sequels and other similar games made by the amazing Grasshopper Manufacture Studios. I have yet to play the sequels, but if they are as good as the first one, expect more videos to be made on the franchise. I would end the video here, but I just want to say that I am grateful for all the support the channel has received over the last 2 years. I've never actually thanked you guys for getting past the initial milestone of 1K, but I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to find an audience that actually listens to what I have to say on whatever I've been consuming lately. Without the support, I wouldn't have been able to make a longer video like this, so thanks. Anyways, Danganronpa reference. With that, I thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more life-changing content, and goodbye.